Okay, we are recording.
Mhm.
This is a meeting of the Land Use Review Board on April 7th, 2025. I am Janet Hurley, the chair of the board, and I will ask each of our board members to introduce themselves. Brooke.
Brooke Dingledine, present.
Kirsten.
Kirsten Sultan, present.
Sarah.
Sarah Hyde, present.
And Alex.
Alex Weinhagen. I'm here.
Thank you. We have an agenda, and I will ask if there are any changes to the agenda, any agenda updates. Hearing none. Let's move on. Opportunity for public comments on non-agenda items. We have no public present physically here and don't see any on screen either. So we can move on to the review and possible action on the environmental justice intake process. We looked at this a few meetings ago and adopted it, and then took a closer look, and particularly Pete offered some suggested enhancements, and we received this as part of our packets, and I would ask if board members have any comments or questions or suggested changes for this. Alex, go ahead.
I don't have any questions. I read through the changes. It looks relatively unremarkable, like fine. Most of the changes make sense to me. Nothing seems substantive really in my mind, just clarifying. So I don't have any questions. I'm happy to move it forward when the rest of the board is.
Brooke.
I think it's just a syntax correction on the second page.
Okay.
In the new paragraph 3, that talks about the designated monitor. So down in the second bullet, or no, well, down in the red, in the new language,
Yeah.
the last of those bullets reads exclusion from, denial of, or I would recommend changing it to or discrimination based on race.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And then farther down that page on number 4, should we make a determination as to it is the executive director that gets forwarded the complaints? We say such as, do we want to keep flexibility or do we want to assign it? That's just something I thought we might want to think about. And then on the third page in the new number 7.
Yeah.
I just felt like in that first bullet that starts out for EJ in Title 6 complaints, go down to the middle of that paragraph, it says, the complainant will be encouraged to check in with the monitor after 10 business days if the complainant has not received a status report within that time frame. I don't know. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but if we have a deadline to respond by, or we're setting that as our deadline, I mean, we can certainly say that, but we should definitely have some way of tracking to make sure that it's happening. And then the only other comment that I had was at the very bottom, that last bullet point under 7. The very ending where we have changed the matter. We used to read the matter may be considered closed, and we've changed that to shall. But then at the end, we've had at the discretion of the designated monitor. So it seemed a little bit inconsistent to have a mandatory shall and then to say, but it's in your discretion.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if there was a way maybe to tighten that up a little bit so that we're a little clearer. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong, there's nothing wrong with discretion. But you gotta pick one or the other, I think.
Yeah. Thank you. Those are helpful comments, Brooke. Any other board members have comments or suggestions or questions? Go ahead, Kirsten.
So I had also noticed in that last paragraph, the wording seems to suggest that it's only if the complainant fails to respond with the request for additional information, that would mean that it would be considered closed. I think it would be considered closed with respect to the request for additional information. Like it's just, it kind of commingles. It says, as one paragraph, if needed additional information can be requested. If the complainant doesn't respond within 10 days, the matter shall be considered closed. Is it the entire matter or just the request for additional information? Like it may be that the monitor determines that, the other information remains sufficient to take a certain course of action. It's just,
Mhm.
it was a little clumsy from my perspective.
Mhm. And any other board comments? Jenny, are you on screen? Yeah, there you are.
Hey.
Do you feel like you could maybe take these comments and make a few tweaks and we can look at it again at a future meeting?
Happy to do so. I have changing the grammar on new number 3 about the last bullet about using the phrase discriminated and changing that.
Yeah,
I have the last bullet in item number 7 about the discrepancy between shall and discretion of the designated monitor. And then I'm just trying to capture them all right now. And then the third.
with that same bullet,
Yeah.
Kirsten suggested that it was clumsy or it leads to ambiguity as to whether the matter is closed
Yeah.
only because of the lack of additional information at 10 days
Okay.
Or what? Is that the only
Okay.
way you can close a case?
Got it.
And there was one more, wasn't there?
Um,
Let's see. Oh, the executive director. Such as, perhaps it shouldn't be
That's-
such as, perhaps it
Got it.
should just be somebody. And that's something we could discuss further. Brooke, is your hand up again?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of follow up on what Kirsten's saying. Yeah, I think it's like if, let's say you're in a situation where you're asking for more information, why are you asking for it? Maybe they haven't given you what's necessary to make the determination in an affirmative way. So is it like at that point we decide on the information that you have given us without the additional? Or do we say you didn't respond, therefore it's closed? So I think it's a really important point she's making.
Yeah.
I've got that. Yeah. I will redline the red line and coordinate with Pete when he's back and look at
Okay,
your
great.
draft.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Any further comments on this topic from anyone? Okay, so Jenny's got some marching orders and we'll see this again sometime soon. Since we now have more members of the public present, I'd like to go back to the agenda item for public comments on non-agenda items. Do we have any today? Thomas is shaking his head. Anybody else? I see no hands going up and hear no sound. So we'll move on to studies and reports. Let's start with Alex. A for Alex.
So nothing to report on criterion 8C, except that there is material up on the website, which has a lot of coming soon information, or lack of information, but coming soon verbiage. As far as tier 3, that's where progress is being made, and communication went out by email Friday to all the stakeholders, advising them of the schedule and the first stakeholder meeting on April 23rd. All of this is up on the website as well now under the tier 3 rulemaking. So there's information there as well. And yeah, that's the main update. I'm hoping to connect with various stakeholders ahead of the April 23rd meeting, make sure that they get their questions answered, and, you know, just have a chance to chat and make sure they're coming. And that's the update. With regard to public engagement outside of the stakeholder meetings, that's scheduled to begin in May, and just waiting on a date based on meeting room availability, and then I can get that up on the website and start publicizing that. The idea is to have engagement on both fronts, not just with the stakeholders that the statute said we had to engage with, but also with the general public, to the extent anyone's interested.
Thank you, Alex. Let's go alphabetically to Brooke.
So the Alex is helping with outreach for our initial emails, for scheduling for our stakeholders, for our various stakeholder meetings in May and June. He's been wonderful in helping to redraft the emails to all of them. We've kind of split up the stakeholder group. He's reaching out to half, I'm reaching out to half, to make sure that we understand their preferences for the meetings that they would like to attend, but also to ensure that we don't have too many people where it gets unwieldy for any of the meetings. And let's see, I'm meeting tomorrow with Rachel to go over the deliverables, because I've been working on fleshing that out more completely for the report and all the components. And so I think tomorrow we'll be able to give her the information necessary to make sure that we understand the staffing needs going forward, not just for the stakeholder meetings, but for then the assimilation and reporting on all of it, the stakeholder as well as the actual report components. So I think we're doing pretty well, and Jenny has given me wonderful information on caseloads over the last 2 years or 3 years with regard to housing appeals, because we do have all of the appeals that have gone through over the past few years categorized so that it's much easier to tease out the housing appeal cases, at least from Act 250. So that was excellent, super helpful that Jenny was able to provide that information. So I think we're moving right along.
Great, thank you. Kirsten.
So I met last week with FPR and a couple of other interested parties, and we discussed at some length what to do in light of the lack of responsiveness to the survey and interview invitation to the wood products manufacturing contacts. And we've come up with a game plan for sort of looking at the file review information against the general permits survey. And the survey results have been compiled. And I met with Rachel too, to go through dates, kind of just talking through in a little more detailed process in terms of bringing information to the board, what dates, and I did come up with a later date for the public meeting, so there's a little more room at the front end for the board to be receiving, hearing from me in some detail about a draft report, and then having an opportunity for input. But there'll be a little less time at the end following the final sort of public comment component. Last week, and we have the venue nailed down. That was a little tricky, but we did find a space. The other thing I'll mention is last week, the invitations did go out to the various invited stakeholders, the industry group contacts who were asked to confirm availability and names of individuals, and we'll sort of get that finalized, but it's been a little bit of sort of, I don't want to say chasing around, but there's a little bit of that. I've been, having some one-on-one conversations and that kind of thing. So it's all moving along, but we're having to kind of regroup a little bit because of that missing piece of information that we had been expecting to have. So.
Okay, thank you. Sarah?
So Wednesday, I'll have a draft tentative agenda for the board to discuss about how we're going to get everything done in the time that we need to get done. I don't have anything else to report on Tier 1A at this point, from Thursday.
Okay, thank you. So, and I'm gonna skip an update because we're spending quite a bit of time discussing a Part 1 memoranda on the regional plan approval process. So I'll ask at this point if there are any public comments on any of our updates or questions for any of us about the work that each of us are spearheading. Seeing none, we'll move on to discussion of regional plan approval process. And I wonder if you can share the memo on the screen, Maddie?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Give me a second to pull. Sure. Basically, I produced two memos relative to this task that we have for the regional plan approval process. And one deals with the regional plan approval in a general manner, and the second one deals with the specific questions of Tier 1B approvals and the future land use map approvals. So today we're going to talk about the general review process for regional plans, and this memorandum hopefully serves as a good foundation for a discussion that we can start having on how to set up this process.
Sorry, just having
It's
a,
okay.
there we go.
And the idea is that our discussions and these memos, much like the Tier 1A that we went through, will serve as a basis for not just discussion, but for guidelines that we would then promulgate to potential applicants.
All right.
So if you could move down to the 60-day pre-application process right there. So the regional planning commissions, of which there are 11 in the state, now will have to submit their plans to the Land Use Review Board for a determination of compliance with statutory requirements. And they will begin this process by submitting to the LURB 60 days before they hold their first public hearing, their first of at least 2 public hearings on their proposed regional plans. So the LURB has 60 days to respond to that pre-application submission. And in that time, the board must have solicited input from partner agencies and including ANR, AOT, ACCD, Agriculture, Food and Markets. We have, some of us have talked about establishing a forum for such comments. It may be that that forum doesn't get used by those agencies based on maybe previous experience through the Act 250 review process, but we might encourage use of a forum in any case. Other agencies that aren't mentioned in statute that may warrant requests or comments at this earlier period are the Public Service Department and the Vermont Emergency Management Division of the Public Safety Department, because they are statutory parties in the approval process later. So it might make sense to include them in this pre-application review. Another question that we should discuss is who should conduct these pre-application reviews. And one idea that I put out there is that it should be conducted by a committee, perhaps consisting of 1 or 2 board members who don't reside in the region corresponding to the application, and perhaps 1 or 2 staff, including the executive director and another primary board support staffer. We've talked, Sarah and I, with some staff about the idea of an ombudsperson that would guide the applicants, the RPCs, through the entire application process. And that's something we can discuss now before I perhaps move on to more details on this process. Does anybody have comments on those ideas at this point? Board members. Alex, please.
I very much like the idea of having 1 or 2 board members with staff, help receive that information that comes in and provide a little bit of guidance as to completeness and that sort of thing. I don't think that we need an ombudsman, not just because it's really hard to say, but because I think these are very well-schooled and professional organizations that are submitting these to us, and they have been involved in the process. And the checklist that you're proposing, which I think is very appropriate, is one that they themselves have created and used for municipal plan review. So these are not unindoctrinated applicants. I don't think we need a special person to help them through the process. I think we have to have a process and we have to have someone for them to interact with, but I don't think the title ombudsman is necessary.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Brooke.
I was curious about, I mean, if this is something, this review, let me start over. What is this in our staff's wheelhouse, to be reviewing, reviewing regional plans outside of, in Act 250, we have criterion 10. But I'm concerned about overburdening the staff or the executive director with a job that they're going to need to get up to speed on. I don't know. I just thought I'd throw that out. I think having the board members reviewing, I think is a great idea, and I agree with stepping back if you're living in that region. I think that's a good idea, to not be the one who's involved directly.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Sarah? Oh, are you done, Brooke?
oh yeah, thank you.
Okay, Sarah?
So I think Alex, I raised my hand when Alex was saying about how we don't need an ombudsperson, but then he came back to, we need somebody. So I just wanted to sort of offer that too, when we have a regional plan coming in, I think having somebody there with the checklist, making sure that it's in and in taking it and making sure everything's accounted for, that is not a board member would be very helpful. I think we can establish that with guidelines, internal processes, but given the fact that I think there's consideration within the document about recusal for the areas that you serve, I think to have that initial person be a staff person to intake and then go out to the board and say, who from the board are you going to have? It's a small world. There could be the need to recuse oneself for more than just area. So I think having a staff person inserted somewhere in the process helps us make sure that this is done on our end also professionally and also at an arm's length.
Alex?
Yeah, I agree that a staff person makes sense to have a staff person doing intake. But I think Brooke raises a really good point that it's unlikely that we have staff that is really well versed in regional plans, what they need to include, what they generally look like, even with criteria 10 and Act 250. So I think in my vision of this, staff would be primarily involved in the intake and the processing of whatever documents need to come in and be cataloged. But that the real lift is going to be on the board to read the plan, refer to the guidelines and statute, and render some comments within a timely fashion. Remember, this is this is before a regional planning commission even submits it to us for approval, right? This is just them giving us notice that they're going to have a hearing in 60 days. So yeah, I think we can do that, the evaluation as a board. And I would also say I don't think there should be any automatic assumption of recusal because a board member lives in the county or region that the regional plan is coming from. I think that decision has got to be made on a case-by-case basis, depending on the board members, involvement and entanglements and that sort of thing.
Kirsten?
Yeah, so I was going to say the same thing that Alex said. I think any board member recusal from an individual regional plan proposal should be considered on a case-by-case basis. I mean, conceptually, in my mind, if the regional plan encompasses like a tier 1 element for an individual municipality and the board member lives in that municipality, that's the kind of thing that seems like an obvious, like from my perspective, like a step out. But I think the broader regional plan content, we would look at that on an individual kind of case-by-case basis in terms of the board's role. But I totally agree with, I'm interpreting that our responsibility here is that it is the land use review board as a whole that has to respond, or has 60 days to respond to this pre-filing. And I think a really important element, and as you've outlined, is all the different other state agencies who we are to coordinate with. And I think that we should come up with, how we'll do that. Like, I think it has to be communicated clearly. We've received this plan, the clock's ticking, please respond by this date. Maybe there's a meeting, and then after that time frame passes, then the subcommittee would come to the board with a recommendation. But ultimately, it'll be the board who then either determines how we'll be responding to that submittal, the 60-day pre-application submittal. So I think some of that, it would be helpful to just figure out. I mean, if I was one of those other state agencies, I would want at least 30 days. That would just be my own. So maybe we should ask them, like, send this because this affects them, send it to them for some feedback if that hasn't already occurred, would be ideal.
Yeah, I don't think we would wait around for 30 days and then send the request. I think
Right, send it,
put it out as soon as possible.
right
But
away.
Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm curious for your perspective on this, Janet, because I find that the statutory construction is a little awkward in that there's a 60-day pre-hearing notice. But there's also a 30-day pre-hearing notice that goes out to the same agencies that we're supposed to coordinate with starting 60 days prior. So it's a little awkward that we're supposed to coordinate with agencies that haven't actually been formally notified yet, but I guess we're going to notify them and then they're going to get notified one more time. Tell me if I'm wrong. My reading of the way this was constructed is that the intent was for our board to provide early feedback such that if the Regional Planning Commission got something really actionable from us, they might wait and change the proposed plan and then send out the 30-day notice when after they had made a change based on our preliminary feedback. Do you think that's what the intent was or not?
I'm not gonna wager a guess on that, but I mean, that's one thing that could make sense, but if if they wanted, an early indication from the LURB, it makes sense that they want the same early indication from those other statutory agencies, and particularly because they said they wanted the LURB to coordinate with them. So to me, it doesn't make sense to wait 30 days. They're going to get another notice. It's awkwardly put together, I would say.
I
Janet,
agree
if I
with what you
may,
and Kirsten said, though, that we want to notify our sister agencies as quickly as possible once we receive the notice from the plan. And then it's just
Right.
a function of how are we distributing the plan that we have received to those parties so that they have something to look at and respond to. And I would note the other awkward part about this is that the RPC is not required to submit the report that helps
Correct.
document how the plan actually meets the
Exactly.
statutory requirements. They don't have to do that at 60 days. They do that at 30 days. So again, awkward.
They don't have to, but I'm proposing that we ask them to produce a draft because
Yeah.
why wouldn't we? Kirsten, did you have something?
oh yeah, I just didn't want anyone to misconstrue. I agree with Alex. I mean, as soon as we get this, these other potentially interested state agencies, we would send it out to them right away. I wasn't suggesting that we would sit on it for 30 days. I was just saying that they're within the 60 days, we need to make sure there's as much space as we can give to these other agencies. And I was also saying, I think it'd be great if we could confer with them about this.
And so this sort of leads us into the next piece of the memo, and I'm going to ask Maddie to put it up again. And that is the checklist that the RPCs are going to be submitting with their plans. And as I just said, I would, as part of the board's guidance, I would require a draft of that checklist to come with this pre-application. So
Am I in the right spot?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So 24 VSA section 4348. At least 30 days, this is what Alex was referring to, prior to the first hearing that an RPC holds, not our hearing. A copy of the proposed plan or amendment, a report documenting conformance with the goals established in section 4302 of this chapter, and the plan elements established in section 4348A of this chapter. And that report is the checklist that they're going to be submitting. And a description of any changes to the regional future land use map with a request for general comments and for specific comments with respect to the extent to which the plan or amendment is consistent with the goals established in section 4302 of this title shall be delivered. So at some point after the 60-day submittal, they're required to submit this, what they're calling a checklist anyway. And I don't see any reason why we shouldn't ask for that in draft form as part of the pre-application. And so this checklist provides an outline that articulates in detail how the plan meets those goals, those statutory goals and the statutory elements, as well as documenting the future land use map changes that we will be seeing. Of course, this first set of 11 plans that we're going to be seeing, all of the future land use maps are changes because we haven't seen future land use maps before. So I presume that this first checklist will have a more description of their future land use map decisions and boundaries than maybe future plans. But and as I said, that we'll talk about future land use maps and Tier 1B stuff separately. Let's just focus on the plan in general at this meeting today. So one of the other things that will need to come with the applications are municipal resolution forms, where a municipality would opt in to seeking that Tier 1B status. The checklist, I mean, for Sarah and Alex and I, we're certainly very familiar with this format that we're going to be seeing because it's very similar to what municipalities, well, maybe some municipalities complete these, but really it's regional planners who complete these kinds of checklists for their commissions when individual municipal plans are coming before the commission for approvals. So it's very much it's modeled after that process. So in any case, the board has to provide a written review of this pre-application. And in that written review, it has to provide any agency comments, or it has to report any agency comments that it received. So again, I think that we should try to provide a form to those agencies that they can then submit comments to us. And if you could move further down the page there, Maddie. Though before we move on to final plan submission, I guess let's just discuss briefly how you see that written review taking shape.
I'm just gonna stop sharing while you're
Okay,
discussing that.
Yeah,
way the
thank you.
video people can.
Alex, go ahead.
So I think a written response to the RPC is appropriate. But I'm sorry to be a nitpicker. Where does it say that in statute that it has to be a written response? Don't we just have to provide comments? I mean, couldn't
No,
somebody who
it
loves
says,
to talk
and,
just come in and speak?
So let me, I thought I recreate, so somewhere in the gray italics, let me see.
It's on page 1 of your memo.
Is it?
Yeah, it says the board shall coordinate with
Yeah.
other state agencies and respond within 60 days.
Yes.
Right,
Yes.
I read respond within 60 days to mean however we choose. Could be in writing.
Well,
We could send a member of our board to their public hearing and provide them comments there. I'm being a little cheeky. Obviously, it should be in writing and it should be as, in advance as possible. But in any case, yeah, I like the way you've laid it out, Jana. This all makes sense to me, right? Like we provide our sister agencies with some sort of form so they have some structure to provide their comments to us. And like Kirsten said, we give them that notice as soon as possible upon receiving the 60-day notice. And we're gonna have to decide how much time to give them. Kirsten mentioned 30 days. I think it probably needs to be less than that, because ideally we wanna, we want to get our feedback to the Regional Planning Commission, not the day before their hearing, if we can. And I like the subcommittee structure. Yeah, to have a couple of board members who sort of run point on an application once it comes in the door and staff have deemed it complete. And then, they're going to bring a recommendation to the full board, right? And then the board will discuss it, and we're in a great place at that point, because yes, we have to write up our comments, but it's not a yes, no, it's just sort of concerns and or compliments, and they can take them or leave them, and then we'll see them again later.
Yeah, I want to just, I think that there was an implicit understanding, if you read all the statute, that this review has to be written, and then it has to include the agency comments. So just let me look into that further, Alex, but let's move to Brooke.
Yeah, so I'm trying to understand in D, where it's D1, where it says, what they have to give, the regional future land use map. And it says with a request for general comments and for specific comments with respect to the extent to which the plan or amendment is consistent.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have to send all of that to all of the different entities that's specified from A through E under that.
No, that's
So-
this. So
No.
D1 is the Regional Planning Commission has to do this. We don't have to do this.
Okay, so we don't have
They
to do
do.
it. They're
Right.
just delivering it all to us.
Yes,
As
and
well
to
as
others.
a number of others. Okay, I was unclear on who was doing that. Gotcha. Thank you.
And actually, yeah, so there you go. Does that
Yeah,
resolve
thank
your
you. Yeah, I was
okay
confused on that.
thoughts on that? Okay,
Thanks.
Sarah or Kirsten? Any comments?
Well,
Good.
I'll go. Or Sarah, do you wanna? Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me conceptually to ask them for the draft checklist. It seems to, cover the content of the plan. But like, that's my understanding of what it would do, and seems totally appropriate. I'm not sure, when you sort of maybe get into the weeds of some potential content from the other state agencies, what's our role at this stage, to me, would be more providing the sort of coordinated review. I don't know if, as part of pre-application, the board itself would be kind of signaling response to any of that, but and by the way, I do agree with the two board members not from the region kind of shepherding, going through it with the staff person, bringing it to the board. Like that makes sense to me.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the final plan submission. And I'll let Maddie get that up on screen. Let's see. So as noted, the regional planning commissions have to hold at least 2 public hearings, and they need to provide 30 days notice ahead of the first hearing. So given those requirements, it's going to be 120 days at least before we see a final plan submission to the board here. However, once that regional planning commission has adopted a plan, they have to submit it to the LURB within 15 days of adoption. So we don't know exactly when we're going to see these. It's going to be at least 120 days from the 60-day pre-application. And and it could be much longer depending on what happens at the regional level, so. At that time, the Regional Planning Commission also has to give us a check for $295. So we need a process to intake that application fee. And along with the plan, we will want to receive the final checklist. So then within 60 days of receipt of that final plan application from the Regional Planning Commission, the board, the Land Use Review Board must issue a determination as to whether that plan conforms to the statutory requirements of Section 4302 and Section 4348A. Did I read those right? So, and we also have to hold a hearing before we make that determination. We have to provide 15 days notice of that hearing in the newspaper of record for the Regional Planning Commission and on our website. And we need to hear any objections to the adoption of the plan that may come. And we, as a board, need to provide a form for any such objections. So we will have a standard form for anyone that objects to a Regional Planning Commission's adoption of its regional plan. And in addition to reviewing the plan for its conformance to the statutory requirements, we will have to address any of those objections in our written decision. So also the people that object have to be interested persons which have participated in the hearing process at the regional level. So once we have held as a board the hearing, we make a determination, and if that determination is affirmative, we need to submit that determination to the Regional Planning Commission and the Vermont Community Investment Board. If that determination is negative, we submit that to the Regional Planning Commission, and the Regional Planning Commission has up to 18 months to secure an affirmative determination from the board. If after 18 months, a Regional Planning Commission has not gotten an affirmative determination from the Land Use Review Board, all of their designations are in jeopardy for all the municipalities within that region, and there are various other state benefits that would be lost. So most of the other pages of this memo are a restatement of statute and what the statutory requirements are for regional plans. And as I said, that checklist will deal with each of these in detail. And the checklist provides that the regional planning commissions or the regional planners that complete those checklists will tell us how each of these statutory requirements are met and where in the plan they may be discussed and whatnot. So I guess at this juncture, I guess let's just open it up for conversation again about how you see that checklist as a tool for the LURB's review. Do you think it's adequate that you know, to what extent do we rely on the reporting that the regional planners have provided in that checklist versus, you know, perhaps having our subcommittee or the whole board sort of fill out a parallel checklist as they review the plan. So can we discuss that a little bit here? Sarah, your hand is up. Go ahead.
So I think this sort of gets into the complexities of why having a staff person, whether they're not now buds person, what have you, sort of oversee the intake and make sure that we're statutorily meeting the timelines necessary. And that there's clear communication out to everybody that needs it. So well done, I think, on that part of the process. What I see oftentimes in facilitating for many years, I'm sure Kirsten's seen this, Brooke I know has worked on PUC stuff, where you as an applicant are made to fill out a form saying, here's how I meet the requirements. And it's always the rose-colored glasses go on, and we have faith in our RPCs that they'll fill this out diligently, but I do believe that there is merit in having us at least take that and validate it, utilizing our own sort of metrics to say, okay, they've completed this, but does it meet? And I think that would be a good foundation for whatever findings of fact and order approval process we're going to have with this. And I like the idea too of using that pre-application period as a way to get the generalities of learning about what the plan is, maybe just the inherent land use, a future land use map. And then this is really with this checklist getting down into the more nitty gritty, if you would. So I offered a lot, but there's a lot to get through, and thank you. I think it's well done the way that you've thought through this.
Alex?
Yeah, agreed. I'm fine with the checklist that the applicant in this case tells us how they've met the requirements, and then, you know, for our purposes, there would be like a separate column to the right of that they don't fill
Right.
in, that we just put a check mark next to, or someone on our team, you know, reads the relevant section and says, "Yep, that passes a straight face test. I agree. Moving on."
Yeah,
So yeah, that seems to make sense to me.
thank you. Brooke?
Yeah, as long as the checklist parallels the statute and covers all the bases, I think it's a wonderful way to stay organized and consistent. And then have it, like Alex is saying, have another column for the check, for the blessing from the board. And this is a lot of work, and thank you for doing all of this and putting so much thought into it.
I think I'd like to hear a little bit about how you all imagine the written decision is drafted and then brought to the board. Kirsten, go ahead.
Well, yeah, before we get into that, and this is a small item, but because the objections of interested parties is limited to those who have participated at the regional planning level, we will need some kind of system of verification about that if and when those objections are filed. And I don't know
Yeah.
if the RPCs keep an ongoing list of here's all these
Yes.
people.
No, they must. In fact, the people that go to their hearings must sign in, and the minutes should indicate, you know, who spoke at those meetings. But what I suggested in this memo was that the form that we are obligated to put on our website for these objections have a place to indicate how that objector participated in the hearings at the regional level. Go ahead, Brooke. Oh, I'm sorry, Alex first.
So everybody put on their legal hat before the legal team does on this question, and then we can kick it to them. Interestingly, this is related to Kirsten's comment. Yeah, we have to if we get an objection, we have to first make a determination if they're an interested party, right? And whether they participated. But unlike some other appeals, a single person does not appear to constitute an interested party under the statute, right? It's any 20 persons signing a petition, or a party entitled to notice, which are not individual people. So legally, I'm kind of curious, unless 20 people attend the Regional Planning Commission meeting altogether and then file a petition, how do they get to be an interested party? Like, does it have to be just one, angry person, and then they get 19 people who didn't attend the hearing to sign on to their complaint? Or so that's my question.
That's what it is. That a singular person can be named the spokesperson for the 20.
Even if the 20 did not participate in the regional planning hearing, just the one person?
Yes, I think so, but that is certainly something that we can have our legal team confirm for us.
Yeah, I would say, just to follow up on that, the statute does not give us time to render a decision, right? I think it says that once we close the hearing, we have 15 days.
15 days, right?
That's not enough. That's just not enough time, right? So that's why the whole pre-application process is super important, and actually where we should be spending most of our efforts on this process. This final approval, I hate to say it, but I will say it, this is a rubber stamp in my mind, or a check if the regional plan is completely flawed and they didn't take our suggestions for corrections early on. So with regard to the decision question you asked, Janet, I hope that we can have a boilerplate decision that is not a 15 to 20 page unique decision with findings of fact and conclusions of law and all of those things,
Yeah.
like you might see for an Act 250 decision or a municipal decision. I think we're going to need a boilerplate one where we can just insert different names and different objecting parties, and not spend a whole lot of time writing in very specific decision language for each of these.
Brooke, go ahead.
Yeah, in Title 24, Section 4476, which governs formal review of Regional Planning Commission decisions, they have in subsection B standing requirements. So we should double check with our legal team if and how this applies, because it sort of sets it out like a zoning appeal where it does allow an individual. Under B1, it's this is on standing. The following have standing to review formal review or become parties to formal review conducted under this section. And it has number 1, a person owning title to property affected by a decision of the Regional Planning Commission who alleges that a decision imposes on that property unreasonable or inappropriate restrictions that significantly impair present or potential use under the particular circumstances of the case. And then it goes on to also include that 20 persons, if they sign a petition alleging a decision is, problematic. So is that like the threshold? If they come to that initial process, I guess at some point we need to verify that they were allowed to come in initially, at least under the standing requirements. So when it gets to us, maybe we do have to verify these are people who do own property that could be affected by it, maybe.
I sort of think of it as like the particularized interest standard, because everybody owns all the property owners of the entire region could be that person. So what about this plan, is particularized to your property that causes you to be harmed? I think. But yeah, let's have our legal team look at this a little bit more.
Yeah, because for standing in Act 250, You can be in a butter, but you have to be impacted. You have to be able to
Right.
demonstrate that impact. So, and if that is a requirement, do we need that to happen at the first, their first attendance? And make sure that that guidance is given to the regional planners, maybe? Anyway, yeah, if they
Yeah.
could look into it, that'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah. Kirsten.
Yeah, so just to clarify too, it's particularized interest is potential for impact too. But the statute to me is fairly clear in that it says, and this sort of goes back to a little bit Alex, and not to belabor this whole topic, but I see it as a really important element of this plan review. It says the designated representative shall have participated in the regional plan adoption process. So it does say that very thing. So I think that would be part of our responsibility to confirm. I mean, the interested party is clearly defined. As far as what Alex was saying in terms of the other question Jana posed of sort of format, I like the idea of having a standardized presentation and typical general content, but I expect there are going to be times when we have to get into some findings and more in-depth analysis. And we need to be prepared to do that if and when, those circumstances arise. That would be, and I think it makes sense for someone to be doing the review, like of the checklist and other narrative content that accompanies the plan itself. Like,
Just two follow-up comments, I guess. One that, yeah, we have 15 days. And so in terms of determining whether somebody has standing to object, I think that probably what we should do is rely on the form that we are going to produce and to ask the objector to provide the information on the form that shows that they are indeed an interested party and, take it at face value and respond to the objection. Because there, as we're pointing out, 15 days is not much time. So, and secondly, well, go ahead, Alex. I see your hands up.
Well, you're welcome to finish, Janet, but I was just going to agree with Kirsten and also say that and help me understand, Janet, if you know where it is in this section of statute, it sounds like we're supposed to have a form for folks who want to file an objection.
Yeah.
But folks could deliver that at our hearing, right? They're not obligated to provide that in advance.
That's it should be on the memo. All the information from statute about that. Let me see.
Okay, we can think about it later.
Okay.
My sense from reading it is that there isn't a time horizon unless we create one, in which case we probably can't because people are going to exercise their right to the fullest extent of the statute. So a couple things. One, we might want to consider if there are objections to a plan that we do not conclude the hearing on the first day that we have it. That, part of our hearing process is if there are any objections, we're going to hold the hearing. And the first step is to ascertain whether those people have standing, and we'll close the hearing, at a successive meeting, so that the 15-day clock doesn't start until we're able to,
Right.
get our wits about us with regard to objections. But also, I'm thinking about what the decision would look like. Let's just say an affirmative decision. I know that a lot of us are bureaucrats. I was a bureaucrat, so I will embrace that term. But a lot of us in the Act 250 program, are as well. And so I think it would be very easy to want to do a really good job with this decision and have a finding on every single statutory element that these plans are supposed to comply with. I don't think we should be doing that. I think we need to. I totally agree with Kirsten that there will be times that we're going to have a case specific finding, especially if there's objections. But but generally for a plan that meets the requirements, I think we want to have a decision that's a little shorter and make some larger blanket statements about compliance with 4302 and various other sections, rather than a detailed blow by blow, which could easily run, 10 pages plus.
Yeah, for some of these plans that may be hundreds of pages long, and, yeah, I agree with that, Alex. The other thing I was gonna say is just in response to your idea about whether the pre-application feedback should be written. And I guess I was thinking that it should be written because of the reason that you stated, that we're not gonna have a lot of time in the final stages to put something together. And if we have something that we put together, in the pre-application phase, it could serve as a starting point for the second phase. So,
Can I just follow up real quick, Janet?
sure.
So I was reading in 4848 again, it looks like objectors have 15 days to file an objection from the point at which the plan is adopted by the Regional Planning Commission. But I think they have to submit their application to us within some period of time after they adopt it. Is it also 15
It's
days?
the same, yeah, it's 15
Okay.
days.
So yeah, we won't be getting objections on our hearing date,
Right.
but we will
Correct.
get them in time to probably do that adjudication. So my suggestion about, having 2 hearings, probably not necessary.
Right, right, got it.
Technical question, sorry to be a nitpicker on all this, but the way I read the statute is, I think in your memo, you say that we have 60 days from the point we receive the final application to render a determination. I
No.
think it's 60 days to
Is
hold
it
a
60?
hearing,
I
right?
don't think so.
Maybe I just misread the memo.
We have to have a hearing. Just a sec, let me find it. Okay. So 60-day pre-application, final plan, okay. So, oh yeah, you're right, Alex, 60 days. So we have to issue a decision within 60 days of receiving that final plan application. And in that time, we have to have held a hearing with at least 15 days notice.
That's where I'm questioning. I'm not sure that we have to render the decision within 60 days. The only part I could find in 4848 was holding the hearing within 60 days. We can talk about that
No,
offline and
I
double check.
think we have to, yeah, I'll double check. I thought my interpretation was we have to make a decision within 60 days of receiving the application.
Yeah,
So
shrinks the timeline even more if that's the case.
Yeah, yeah. So I will confirm that. Any other board comments at this point?
Well, I'm just noting that the statute expressly says that the board is to hear any objections concurrent with regional plan review. So I think that's the idea. You have it all in hand.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess in terms of the plan review criteria, the elements of the affirmative determination under 24 VSA 4348H, this is the top of page 5 on your memo, and I don't know if we're going to go back to that and continue going through it, but I would just want to make sure. So the RPC checklist, I would be understanding that it would encompass, A, B, C, D, like compatibility with the adjacent regional planning areas, et cetera, like all those different things.
Yeah. Yes, the
Okay.
checklist does address all of those.
Yeah.
Yes. Any other board comments? I just want to give Thomas a chance. He raised his hand at one point a little bit ago.
Thank you. This is Thomas Weiss, President of Montpelier. And I have two thoughts based on the discussions I've heard so far. One of them has to do with Montpelier's municipal plan, city plan, which is being revised right now, and its compliance with the goals and elements. And I'm taking a position somewhat different from Alex Weinhagen's in that their coverage of those elements seems to be weak compared to what's listed in the statute for them. And self-certification doesn't seem to be the appropriate response. So I am concerned that perhaps part of the regional plan submission documents would be a checklist of each of the elements and goals and where in the plan those are addressed.
Mhm.
And then you as the board would then check to make sure that they are indeed there and they do satisfy the requirements. And maybe you could avoid having to do a detailed findings and conclusions process if you did something like that. But I'm concerned about things being glossed over. The second comment I have is that when Brooke Dingledine talked about section 4476, I wasn't listening carefully. But I do know that chapter 117 defines interested parties differently from interested persons. So one needs to be careful about not confusing those two. And with 4476, I don't know whether Brooke had referred to interested persons or interested parties. So it's just something to keep in mind that the two terms are not interchangeable in chapter 117. I had that problem a few days ago.
Mhm.
So that's why it popped into mind today.
Just to point out, we're not going to be approving municipal plans.
I understand
Okay.
that. But
It's
it's
a
just-
parallel
but
process,
It's just,
yeah.
it's a parallel process, but what was happening in the municipal plan is something that I think should be addressed or considered how to address to prevent it from happening in the regional plan and your.
Mhm. Great, thank you. Any other comments on this process that we are working on the development of guidelines for? I don't see any coming forth, so let me look at our agenda. I can't find the window that had the agenda up. Here it is. So, let me just ask the board one last time if there's anything that you'd like to further discuss on this first memo today before we move on. Kirsten.
Well, yeah, my interpretation of what we're calling the RPC checklist is that it does include some narrative type information.
Yeah.
It's not just a list of, a one pager, check all these boxes. It's comprehensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's an expandable checklist that allows for, as that's being filled out, you get more and more pages added to it. So, we'll receive these checklists and they will be varying lengths depending on, that are, for each regional plan that we get. raise your
Well,
hand again, Kirsten?
Yeah, I did raise
Go
it
ahead.
again. I mean, and this goes back to the draft. I'm a little bit, all over the place, but I'm feeling like when we alert the other state agencies that this plan has been filed and that we're interested in anything they might have to say, I think it'll be helpful to, if there's any further instructions for them, kind of spell it out to the extent we're able to help.
So
Just
there-
if there's
they-
any language or statute that is helpful to make sure that whoever receives that invitation on their end, I think we should include that.
So I'll just say that these agencies are very much in tune with this process that we are developing. And certainly at least two of them, ACCD and ANR, are very interested in all of this and how we intend to make these determinations. And I would say that Agency of Agriculture too, they've been keenly interested in how we're going to be developing certainly the tiers. So I think, all of these agencies will be very responsive and will be looking for opportunities to give us input. So. Okay, anything else on this first stab at the regional plan process guidelines? Okay, thank you. So I spoke with our general counsel earlier. They don't have any reason for an executive session today. So I think we can move on unless there's something that I don't know about or that came up in the last few hours.
Chairwoman Janet Hurley, this is Jenny Ranas. I think we would be happy to discuss some of the questions that were raised about party standing, perhaps like in the context of giving you guys legal advice, while this conversation that you were having today is still fresh in everyone's minds.
How do people feel about that, Sarah?
Is that better done one-on-one with you to help hone the memo rather than all of us have a discussion about it? Because that's really something that needs to be put into the guidance potentially. Is nothing that we can necessarily effectuate now unless council believes
Right.
that that's pertinent information for the rest of the board that we need to discuss at this time.
Alex?
Yeah, Jenny, while I appreciate the offer, I'm really not interested. I'd prefer to give you a little time, legal staff, a little time to think and crystallize, and then, as Sarah said, flow it back through the lead on this, which is Janet, before all of us get to pontificate. Because some of us like to pontificate and talk a lot. I don't know who that would be, but might be me. So less of that.
As a lawyer, I can't relate to that comment at all, but but that's fine. If that's okay, if that's cool with you, Janet. we're
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, I would agree with those sentiments, both of them. So let's do that offline, Jenny.
Sounds great.
Okay. Any additional public comment on anything before we consider adjourning this meeting? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Alex. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Sorry, I couldn't see I saw Alex and Sarah, and then there was
Aye.
something on screen and I couldn't see the other two. Thank you.
Kirsten, I.
That's 5 ayes. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for participating.